Where is baby's belly button? Where are baby's eyes? Under her hat. Jubilee left some books out here. I had to dig to find a Bible, but it's here. I found it. So we can go to the Gospel of John, or we can continue later with Where is Baby's Belly Button. We also have Oscar Octopus and the Fish Faces. That looks like a winner. Yes, we have classics like The Cat in the Hat. Psalms of Praise. And yes, Llama Llama, Red Pajama. We've got all the good books out here in the backyard. So, I'm only going to do 2 verses today. We're going to keep a little bit shorter. And, yeah, I think it's good stuff, though. So, John chapter 18, verses 39 and 40. Well, let's back up to verse 38. That'll help us with some context. Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, "I find no fault in him. But," verse 39, "you have a custom that I should release someone to you at the Passover. Do you therefore want me to release to you the King of the Jews?" Then they all cried again, saying, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now, Barabbas was a robber. So, background. Rome did what they could to try and appease the people and make them happy and keep the Jews from having riots. And so one act of kindness that they would do would be to release a prisoner. Now, most often, this would be like a political prisoner. Jews, zealots, would be imprisoned because they were fighting back against Rome. And so this was like a get-out-of-jail-free card for one of those guys. That way, it was just supposed to make the Jews happy, so that the zealous Jews who might start a riot might get one of their zealot friends back. And so, that was just something that Rome did as a little present on Passover, on the feast day, on one of their largest and main feasts. And in this case, they only had one prisoner, perhaps, that was there, available to be set free, whatnot. Now, from the Gospels, we account that he was not only a robber, but a murderer. So here we have Barabbas. Now, what's interesting is, I want to say it's in the Syriac. No? Not the Syriac. Maybe. But in one of the other, the Aramaic versions of the Bible, I believe, he is referred to as Jesus Barabbas. Now, Jesus was a really common name. That's something we need to remember, is that the New Testament name Jesus is the same as the Old Testament name Joshua. So, Yeshua, Jehovah's salvation, it was a common name. Joshua was obviously a huge figure in the Jewish culture and in their religion. And so many people named their sons Joshua, or, as we read in the Greek, then translated to English, Jesus. And so it was a common name. So for what it's worth, it is very likely this guy's first name was Jesus. Barabbas. Now what's interesting is if you take that name and you break it down, we've got Bar, Abba. Now Bar is son of Simon Bar Jonah. Jesus calls Peter. That's Simon, the son of Jonah. And then Abba, which many of us are familiar with because of Jesus' words on the cross. Abba, Abba Father. It's a word for dad. And so this thief, criminal or crook, murderer, his name was Jesus, Son of the Father. An interesting name. And so what we see happen is Pilate was trying to find a way to let Jesus go, but let there still be justice. How can we have justice and yet still have freedom? And so what we have is this, well, here's this unique situation. Today happens to be the preparation day for Passover, so here we go. I can let him go free, even though he would have gotten his crimes. But they said, no, give us this other guy. And he gives him this other guy as an option. I think he gives him a real crappy option on purpose, because they probably wouldn't want this murderer and thief to go free. So he's like, well, I got to let someone go free. So maybe he was trying to pressure them, like, well, someone's got to go, so do you want the murderer or this guy? They picked the murderer. Couple things we can glean from these two verses. One of which is simply this, is that today many people will happily take any option if it's not Jesus. People will believe anything as long as they're not required to believe the one thing. As long as they're not required to believe the one thing that they fear, the one thing that they don't want to believe in, they'll believe in anything. And so this is where I believe Satan has created so many alternatives to believing in God. You know, for thousands of years, he's created false religions and alternatives to the one true God. And in recent history, in the last 175 years, he's been giving yet more alternatives where there's no God at all. You know, that was an absurd thought up until recently. It's not that we were primitive. It's not that mankind wasn't intelligent. No, not at all. It's just the fact that they realized that when you see a painting, no one ever questions if there's a painter. When you see a building, you know there's a builder. And when we look at creation, we know there's a creator. Mankind used to be smart enough to understand that concept. But now we're coming up with alternatives of, you know, creation created itself. You see, the Big Bang was this explosion where nothing became everything. Makes sense, right? And so, we'll believe anything as long as it gives us an out, to give us a way to get away from God, of whom we are going to be held accountable to. People don't want to be held accountable, and so they find a way out. This is what they do. So, one thing we glean from this is the fact that people will take the fake Jesus. They'll take the alternative to Jesus. Doesn't matter if it's Jesus, Son of the Father, as long as it's not the actual one true Son of God. The second cool thing, which I wasn't planning on, but it popped in my head as we were going, is this idea of Pilate. How can Pilate fix this situation? How is it possible to have justice and yet freedom? And that's what we find in the gospel of Jesus Christ, right? How is it that God can be just and punish sin? Because sin must be punished. And yet, how can he allow us to go free? Well, it's because he sent his son, Jesus, to receive the punishment. That is how God is still just and yet merciful. Someone had to pay. Jesus paid in our place. Substitutionary atonement, right? The atonement, the paying or covering of sins. It's a substitute. He is substituting us. All of our sins are laid upon him. And it's the idea that because of that, he sees us as perfect. Instead of seeing us, he sees Jesus. That's the idea. It's Christ's righteousness that he's going to look upon. And so again, it's always hard for me to wrap my little brain around the idea that God will someday look upon me and see the righteousness of Christ. It's not my own works. I'm not super righteous, but God will see a super righteous standing before him as he sees Christ on my behalf. So, how can he be just and yet merciful? It is only with Jesus Christ can those two things continue to exist. The mercy of God and the justness of God. So, all of those things in two verses. I told you I'd keep a little shorter today. We can do Llama Llama Red Pajama if you'd like. Or I'll just save it for tomorrow and we will start into chapter 19 of the Gospel of John. Love you guys. Have a great day. You guys take care.